Welcome to a Stranger Perspective podcast dedicated to the idea that our lives are always better when we take time to understand and consider the perspectives of other people. Today, I have my brother, Jesse McAllister, on, and Milena is going to co-host with us, so should be a great conversation. How's it going, man?
Doing good.
Awesome. Milena?
Happy to be on.
Great.
Yeah, doing good. Everybody happy? Good?
Dude, everyone's happy.
Everyone got a little drink?
Yeah, I already drank my margarita, so...
So it's only downhill from here.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Tonight's tequila night.
Well, we kind of like have a couple things we probably will end up talking about, I'm sure, over the next hour or so. But it's interesting because, you know, Jesse, you've actually been a big part of the journey Milena and I have been on like the last year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
I've probably told this story like once or twice already, but like our whole like deconstruction started with the time that you brought up kind of
hell.
Yeah, your stuff about hell. So when we were just like really traditional fundamental Christians,
Yeah.
you know, we had a view of hell that was like called eternal conscious torment, which means that if you go to hell, you go there forever and you never get out, and it, you know, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's torment for all eternity. And then you brought up like some stuff about how the Bible, you know, if you read it with that belief already, it's going to appear it says it that way. But if you believe it, or if you read those verses, you know, with the belief that, you know, hell is not eternal, but the punishment of being destroyed, which is what happens when you go to hell, according to this belief in Christianity, that is eternal. And you brought that up to me. I was like, oh my gosh, something I was 100% sure about, you know, I was wrong about.
Yeah.
And then
or potentially wrong.
Yeah, potentially wrong. At least I couldn't be sure.
Yeah.
So I wasn't 100% anymore.
Right.
And that was literally like the first thread in my sweater.
Dude.
My theological sweater.
I pulled your sweater.
Yeah. But
and then ended up pulling my own sweater.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just a sweater puller.
Metaphorically.
But yeah, I mean, so did you, like you said, you pull your own sweater. Did that journey start for you like, well, first, let's just say like where are you at right now with like your faith and your beliefs? So would you still call yourself a Christian? Are you somewhere in between? Is it like kind of unknowable?
I think for me, like I consider myself a Christian in the sense like in my deconstruction, I feel like I've become more of a Christian, like a deeper Christian, but I know that term comes with a lot of baggage too, and so like I don't introduce myself to people as Christian, like, oh, hey, I'm a Christian, like that's my identity, or that happens to be the set of beliefs that have worked for me. But I don't think I am a Christian in the sense that like that's my identity. Like my identity is a spiritual person, I would think. And I use Christian terminology because that's what I know best. But I wouldn't say like the traditional description of a Christian like mainstream nowadays is not what I would describe myself as. So,
so it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you kind of work out your faith within the framework of Christianity, how you like visualize God or how you approach things like prayer, you know. Yeah. But maybe if like the traditional kind of Christians nowadays sat down with you and like asked, you know, about all of your beliefs and stuff, I
would not be orthodox. Yeah. I wouldn't line up. I would be like definitely heretical to like, especially Catholicism, but even more probably Protestantism because they're even more dogmatic about a lot of things. So
yeah, that's actually one thing that was kind of interesting for me in my deconstruction too, was like realizing the differences between like, and actually, honestly, I probably couldn't even like break it down for you super well even now, but like the differences between being just evangelical and Protestant and like how we're all under this Reformed branch and how Reformed theology was like a response to these certain things. And like, what was the church really like before that? And how do we even know we're like the denomination or the practice we're a part of is like really what Christianity was meant to be.
Totally. And no one even talks about the Eastern Church, which is like,
Eastern Orthodox.
They think they're the true church and like they split, and then we came out of the Catholics, and then like the Orthodox. I align more with Orthodox than Protestant or Catholic, I think. And
I think like Eastern Orthodox is a little more like mystical, right? Like it can kind of like embrace more of the people that don't have set beliefs. Is that kind of what that's
I'm not
like
an expert on them, but yes, they leave more room for mystery and like symbolism and mysticism in their theology.
Yeah. And mysticism was like a big thing we kind of wanted to talk about on this podcast too, because we've talked about mysticism like in our own conversations here and there, but I feel like you've really identified probably with that that kind of
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of still struggling to understand what it even means.
For sure. Yeah.
And I know it's a little like esoterical just in
It
its
kind of
nature,
is. It's
right?
hard to talk about. So I feel like we'll probably talk around it a lot. Just
yeah.
like I was saying, but like, yeah, it's hard to nail down a definition, but yeah.
Yeah. Would you want to give it a shot? Like,
Yeah,
what
sure.
like as close as you can what mysticism
Yeah.
is? Yeah.
So I love the definition from Evelyn Underhill. She says she was a Christian mystic, I think in the late 1800s or early 1900s. She defines it as the art of union with reality. And so
I like that.
it kind of takes all the religious words out of it. So it's just like, it's the art of trying to meet reality on its own terms and trying to face reality unobstructed. So I think the idea is that generally there's us, like the true self, and then there's our interpretations of reality, and then there's a reality. There's always something in between us mediating reality to our experience. And so taking away the obstructions for us to just meet reality face to face is what mysticism is.
Gotcha.
Also, Jesse,
in a
just try to
nutshell.
talk a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah. Like
Not
try
in
to
my
talk-
mic, sorry.
Yeah, you're good. But yeah, that was cool.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like whatever reality is what reality is, but we're all going to have a different like perception of that reality based on whatever maybe our experiences, maybe our already established belief systems.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of the recognition that is it kind of the recognition that reality is reality, but all of us, it's all kind of up to our best guess. And that in between is like the mystery, right? And it's mystic.
It's not not really that.
Okay, gotcha.
It's kind of more like, here's reality. Reality is unchanging. Reality exists as it is. And like Paul says in Corinthians or whatever it is, like, it's like we're looking through a mirror dimly. We have reality translated to us through our senses and through our ideas of reality, through our structures of reality, through our frameworks, through our religious system. Mysticism would be getting rid of all that so that you can just experience reality face to face, like just you contacting reality. And that's what in the Christian tradition is called union with God. So it's like you experiencing God, not through thoughts, not through ideas, not through emotions, not through like any sort of framework, but just you experiencing God in a like transcendent, mystical way that you can't put into words.
Like pure experience
Yes.
of God's presence.
Yeah.
And not like understanding God through a different medium, like even like the
Right.
Bible or something, right?
Yes.
That would be one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
or
not
someone's
it's not
teachings.
like textbook. It's not something that you can even like pinpoint very well, right? It's just an experiential knowing.
Yeah. Experiential knowing.
It sounds really Eastern
way
too,
to put
because
it.
it's like, it almost sounds like you're emptying yourself of all preconceived, like,
That's exactly the idea. Yeah.
yeah. And that's kind of like close to Buddhism of like,
Yeah.
you know, letting go of desire. It's similar in that way. Like the more,
Totally.
like the less you can, you know, be, the closer you are to just knowing God for whatever God truly is.
Right.
Interesting. I like that.
So how would you define like God in your experience in your journey of spirituality? Like how would you define what God is
Yeah.
now?
I think that's a tough question. Like, I would say from the beginning, like, I think all religion is born out of mysticism. And the core idea of mysticism is that there is a true reality up here. That's God. Then there's lower realities and lower realities, like
Talk a
different.
little closer.
Sorry. There's lower realities, different realms, whatever. And then there's the experience of a finite human. And God is not in the sensible, physical, like material realm, but he's something transcendent. Like he's an experience. He, like Richard Rohr says a little bit, like he'll talk about how like God is more of a verb than a noun. Like God's not a thing that you can nail down. Like God's not a thing that you could describe. God's an experience. God is,
Yeah, God is just like not one thing
Yes.
that you can interface with at one time.
right.
Yeah, that's
God
yeah,
is
that makes
reality
sense.
with a face. Yeah.
That's why Richard Rohr, right, who's like kind of one of the big Christian mystics, he always talks about how like the first, like, you know, Christians believe Jesus was like the incarnation of God.
Yeah.
And like how literally is like God come in human form. But Richard Rohr says, when I was reading his book, what was his latest one?
The universal Christ.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like the first incarnation of God, the first like tangible like way that we can see, feel, touch, know God is through all of like creation. Yeah. Through like nature, through the planet. And it's like literally, it's like if it came from God, it's God. It's literally God, you know, came out of God. And it's like, and I kind of like that because my beliefs now kind of fall along the lines of like everything's kind of true and everything's probably not all the way true.
Yeah.
And that whole thing of like the earth being like the incarnation of God, like God's body in a sense, also kind of goes along with like a lot of like pagan stuff, a lot of, you know, other religious views that kind of even worship the earth.
Yeah.
Or feel like, you know, they like getting in touch with God comes through nature and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. It's always interesting to me how it all kind of ties and it's all kind of like has this similar thread weave through it.
Totally. And
then we all kind of, you know, identify with a certain part of it.
Yeah.
You're like, I just remember when we did mushrooms for the first time and we were trying to like figure out what we thought about who God is and what we thought about our belief system. And when we took mushrooms and we went for a hike, it was just like this weird experiential knowing of everything feels like it's God.
Yeah.
And I couldn't explain it and I couldn't understand it because how can you explain to somebody, especially a Christian, like everything is God, like everything is an incarnation of God, like the trees, the wind, the river, the rocks.
I had that same experience. Yeah. When we did mushrooms in Zion, I was laying on a rock and just like letting the sun like bathe my face with my eyes closed. And I just got this sense where I was like, God is the sun. I know, like, it sounds like such a druggy thing to say, right? But I was like, God is the sun. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I understand why people used to worship the sun in like ancient cultures. And like, I understand how like whenever I feel alone, I know I'm not alone because God is everything. Like God's my experience of life. I am God living, you know, like Alan Watts says, you are the universe conscious of itself, or you are God immersed in his own illusion, you know, just so that he could forget he's God, so that he could remember again and have something new to do, like almost. Whoa. And it's like,
that's deep.
That's crazy.
I realized, I would like mushrooms was a part of helping me realize that like God is these things. And so like, I can never feel alone because I think that's my deepest, I think that's my deepest. Yeah. I think that's,
your deepest
our deepest existential fear of human beings in general. But
what is that
really
fear?
Came out of being alone and like separated and separated from source or whatever. And like mushrooms help me look at the sun and just be like, God is the sun. Like God is the warmth I'm feeling in my body. God is like this big rock I'm laying on. And like, God is my whole life and experience. Like I can't get away from God. And like, and it's that's like why, that's why it's so limiting to define God as like, it's helpful to anthropomorphize God because it gives you a bridge to the mystical and you can't jump straight to the mystical. You have to have a bridge there. And I think that's why Jesus talks and anthropomorphizes God a lot and calls him Father and stuff. But like once you can get to the mystical, it's like, oh, I don't need these like words, these labels, these structures. It's all just, it just all is like, and me putting a label on it is going against mysticism or negative theology in the church, which is like, you can only say what God is not because God isn't anything.
Well, okay. What do you think about this scripture?
God isn't like not anything.
God's not anything, but he's everything. So it's like, I don't know. He's also nothing, I feel like.
Do you remember when Jesus said
he's no one thing? Sorry.
Yeah, he is no one thing. And I agree with that. And there's this scripture where Jesus says, I am the Father and the Father is in me. And I remember it being taught to us like, see, Jesus is saying he's God. He's the Son of God. He is God.
Yeah, then read the next verse. It says, I pray for my followers who are going to believe on me that they would have the same union with God and with me that I share with God.
Right.
Like the very next verse.
And that's why I love that scripture. And I love studying that Jesus was literally claiming to be God and that he's teaching us you are also in union with God. You are also sons, like in the same way that Jesus is a son of God. We are all sons and daughters of God. Yeah. What are your thoughts? Elaborate on like your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Like to bring up Alan Watts again, he says like a Christian would say like, I am God, and everyone would crucify him or burn him at the stake. You go to India and say, I'm God, and everyone, sorry, I keep touching my ear things. You go to India and say, I am God, and everyone's like, oh, he finally figured it out. Like, good job.
Wow.
And it's, I think, it's panentheism is what we were talking about, which is like God exists as this true reality, and then all the lower realities consist in God. And so it's like God's this big, like, circle, let's say. And let's say our reality is this, but it's still within this circle. Sorry,
I just want you to get closer.
I don't know if I can, if that even, I was like out of the screen probably.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
So like if God is this big circle, he's ultimate reality, then like then there's like other realities. And then if our experience is this, like everything in this circle is still God, but God is bigger than the circle.
Yes.
And it's like, I have to be a part of God if I exist, because existence is God.
Can you tell us where you first experienced this, like revelation, I guess you could say? Like tell us your journey. Like, how did you get to this point where you're like, this is what I accept about reality and God and my view on life right now? Like, how did you get there?
I think it was a long process. Obviously, like you guys, I worked in the church. And so I think there was a subconscious like level of like, okay, I'm deconstructing. I can't stop this train. It's going already, but I can stop here, here, and here. Like I can stop at knowing Jesus is God. Like he's like the Messiah. And like, I don't even know what I believe about the Bible anymore, but at least like I can trust Jesus and like, he's my anchor. And then like, I stopped working at the church because of those things. And I was like, I don't know what I believe really. I feel like I believe some things that I don't even know I believe. Like I won't let myself believe them because I worked at a church and I had to like,
I feel like I had
be a certain person around people. Like, you know, like I could be like the weird liberal mystic Christian, but I couldn't be like I don't believe Jesus is God kind of Christian. Cause then it's like, well, you can't be standing on stage leading worship or whatever.
Then you gotta leave the club.
You gotta leave the club. Yeah. And so that was kind of like the beginning. Like I'd been deconstructing for probably a couple of years, but I was more deconstructing my Christian beliefs within the Christian framework. And then I stopped working at the church. Before I stopped working there, I was delving into Eastern philosophy and like religion and stuff. And then I stopped working there and I kind of gave myself freedom to just like plunge full deep into like, I don't know what I believe and that's okay. And like, let's study everything and like, let's incorporate this and that. And I think the coolest thing to me was discovering the Christian mystics, because I was like, I have this 25-year long ingrained structure of reality. And I could go into Hinduism or Buddhism and learn all these new words in Sanskrit and like all their symbology and all of their words for God and their Trinity and stuff. And like, I could do that, but it would take a long time. It would take a lifetime or another 10, 20 years to like have those symbols ingrained in my conscious structure. But I already have Christianity ingrained in my conscious structure as like a foundation. And so even when I gave up that foundation, I rebuilt it back through reading the Christian mystics. Cause I was like, you're saying the same thing these Hindus are saying, and you're saying the same things these Buddhists and these Taoists are saying, and these New Agers are saying, and like, you're saying the same thing. All mystics have said throughout all time, which is called the perennial wisdom or the perennial tradition. And it's like, oh, this is perfect. Like I don't know how to describe the journey, but it's like
you're basically like at this place where you're like, Christian mysticism offered you this opportunity to like move forward into like where your new beliefs were starting to lie without restricting you from like without making you like give up all the framework through which you've understood God up until this point in your life.
Which I'd be fine doing, because that's not like, that's an attachment in itself, which is like not good, I think, in the end, if you're trying to transcend all that stuff. But it's helpful. Like I said, as a bridge, like you need some way of like words are a bridge to mysticism. Like me talking with you guys right now is us trying to like share an experience together, which is like the core desire of everyone, to not be alone, but to share experience and to have union. And the words are the bridge to us being in each other's heads. And in the same way, like the Christian terminology is just a set of metaphors to bridge me to mysticism. I could use different terminologies, or I could talk about energy and chakra if you want, but like I talk about other stuff because it's what I know better. So, and then I incorporate all that too, I think. But
yeah, you talk about chakras and energy, and you've studied all that too. But what I'm noticing is a lot of religions and cultures use different terminology, but they're saying the same thing.
Yes.
Totally. And that's kind of like what you've discovered over time from studying different religions.
So is it kind of like this thing where it's like, it doesn't really matter the language that you speak, we're all talking about the same thing, kind of? Is that, do Christians embrace that?
I think so.
Or, I mean, mystics?
Yeah. I think the mystics of all religions would.
And they would kind of just say like, oh, like we're all mystics, we're all connected, but these are just the backgrounds that we come from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why like mystics don't have a problem, like guys like Richard Rohr, even though he's like Christian, like mystic, like he doesn't have a problem with like Buddhist and, you know, other religions and stuff.
Yeah.
He praises them, talks about them very favorably, and doesn't ever try to get you to not believe that.
Yeah.
Because like that's kind of the belief is like we're all looking, you know what? I might be a mystic then, because that's kind of how
you guys
feel.
are totally mystics. Like,
yeah, totally.
I'm and like, we're talking about the same thing. Just what like framework are you using? What skin is over it?
Totally.
You know? Yeah.
And it's okay to have different skins and different frameworks because each one brings us something helpful to the table. Like Buddhism is like, the Buddhists said to have taught no metaphysics, no like what we would call theology as a Christian. He like taught no, like this is how reality is and works, and these are like how the spiritual realms are and this and that. He said, like, I mean, there's the like the core tenets of Buddhism is like life is suffering. Basically, suffering comes from attachment. When you transcend attachment, you transcend suffering, and then follow the eightfold path, which is like cultivate virtue and be a good person, and some of these other things, meditate and use your energy wisely and stuff. And it's like, or there's the 8 wheels of yoga, which is the same thing. I think it's 8. I don't remember. Or there's in Christianity, cultivate virtues like faith, hope, love, peace, joy, like the fruits of the spirit. And, you know, like
it's all
that kind of stuff. It's all pointing to the same stuff. Yeah. But like like Cynthia Bourgeault is a Christian mystic who teaches with Richard Rohr at his school. She says it's the duty of each major religion of the world to bootstrap each other. Like we're all getting kind of a piece of the pie. Maybe some people get more piece or less piece or whatever. It's more of like we're approaching it from different perspectives, and we all need to like integrate each other's like perspectives, like this podcast is, you know, like that's
exactly the point.
Only way to do it, or else you get stuck in your bubble and your narrow.
You get stuck in your little
tunnel vision,
echo chamber.
Yeah.
And it's like the problem is like you literally don't know what you don't know until you start to let yourself be exposed to like other people who see the world differently. And then you actually find out, like you're saying, like you find out people actually see the world very, very much the same as you.
Yeah.
But because we all have these different like skins we put over our belief systems and stuff, like, you know, we separate, but when we get stuck, like, and we have this one piece that, you know, we're really good with in Christianity, but Buddhism has this one piece of connecting with God and knowing God that is very like powerful, that they kind of have a corner on, and, you know, Hinduism all the way down the line. And it's just like, you know, but it doesn't even stop there with like religion. It's like all of
philosophies, like everyone's religious. It's whether you it's your framework for life is your religion. 'Cause it's just whatever structure for reality you have. And even if you're not religious, even if you're not an atheist or a religious person, you're somewhere in between, or like, don't even think about that. You still have a way that you interact with reality. Yeah. And
that's actually really helpful for me, what you explaining it that way.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah. And then I feel like too, like it helps that whole like practice. It's like, it should be a practice for everybody to like venture outside your perspective on purpose, because like so much pain and like so much religious like abuse or trauma, or, you know, we're not like anti-Christian or anti-religious or anything at all. We're probably, like you said, finding ourselves to be more spiritual than ever in certain ways.
Yeah.
But it's like, when it comes to like just living your life day to day, you really need other people that have had different experiences than you, that see the world the way they see it. And you need to hear from them how they see it, because they're going to see a thing that you don't see. They're going to live a life, you know, that you haven't lived in some ways. And to be able to let their, you know, understanding of the world, you know, come into your life helps you understand what you're doing. So it's like kind of what you're saying about like, you know, religion, but like in every area of our lives, like even if you think, okay, I'm really good at like, I'm a people person. Yeah. Well, there's another person, and maybe they're not even a great people person, but they have had these experiences, and you have something to learn from them about being a people person, you know, understanding these types
You know what I find very interesting too about, just like from our background, where we come from, I remember before we even started venturing out into this journey of deconstructing and finding our spirituality and what we believed about reality and God, we were not very open as Christians to hearing other people's perspectives. In fact, we would say we were, and we'd listen to someone's story about why they chose to be Buddhist or why they chose to be Catholic.
While in
why
your
they
mind, they're talking and you're thinking of how to refute it.
Right.
You're like discrediting every
You're
line.
discrediting everything.
Yeah.
You're discrediting
you're
their
afraid.
experience.
You're afraid that your structure for reality is going to fall apart and you won't be left with anything. And then existential crisis.
But people don't even know they're afraid. I feel like that happens on such a
an
subconscious
unconscious,
level where it's just like, you're so, your brain, all it does, your brain is just a pattern making machine.
Yeah.
And you fall into a pattern of belief and your brain wants to stay there, like neurologically, like the neural pathways in your brain.
People don't even know that they're doing it. Like we didn't even know. We would literally be coming up with a debate or like an argument to counteract why their perception and view of reality was wrong.
Yeah.
And why our way was superior. Do you remember how we used to do that? And a lot of people do that. And I think that's the gift that mysticism offers people. If you're like willing to, explore that and just like release control and surrender to this box of reality that you have. Because I think that's kind of what mysticism is to me, at least, is like kind of surrendering to like, okay, yes, I have this structure. I have these thoughts and these ways of viewing the world, but I'm willing to lay that down, to listen and surrender. Yeah, you're not attached to it.
Well, then you
That's
have
the
to
key.
not. The thing is, at the end of the day, you have to not be afraid of whatever you might discover.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to listen to it, if it bugs you, if you hear people talking about perspectives different than you and it just kind of like makes you uncomfortable.
That's not right. Yeah.
It's like, that's when like the problem's with you.
Yes.
Because you're not even willing to listen and you're too like, why would you feel that way? Unless on some subconscious level, you're afraid of discovering a problem with your belief system.
Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
for sure.
Like I have a friend who we talk every once in a while, and every time we talk, it's like since they've, I guess it's a he now, since he's like discovered that I've been on a deconstruction journey the last like few years, he's like, every time we talk, it's like weasel the conversation over to like, oh, what do you believe about this and this and this and this now? And I'm like, why do you care? And he's like, oh, I just want to know how to relate to you. And like, there's good intention in it and some of it too, but I'm just like, it's so obvious. Like you're afraid of losing your structure. So you're questioning everything that I believe now, like, so that you can prove to your subconscious, which is your ego. Yeah. That like, okay, I'm firm. Like I'm safe. Like it makes yourself safer to prove other people wrong.
Right.
Yeah. And it is one thing to listen to other people that agree with you talk about why other people with opposing beliefs are wrong. Like that's easy, but it's a whole nother thing to actually be open to someone with a different belief, try to explain to you why they believe, what they believe.
Totally.
And when you spend more time doing that than you do listening to people that believe the same thing as you, you will start to change. Like it doesn't matter. Like you will, because other people's perspectives will start to click and make sense. And over time, you'll just be like, I think I'm a little more open to that. But at first, it feels like such a threat to your whole life.
It is a threat. Yeah.
It is a threat because that's when you will lose your religion in some ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally.
And that's why mushrooms are so like powerful as a medicine too.
It's a medicine from God.
I know for me, I kind of saw it as like I think I just saw it only as like a party drug or like something that would like, put you in touch with demons and spirits that you don't want to mess with.
That's what my dad told me.
But like,
or just mess you up psychologically forever. Like, oh, he's like a druggie now. And like
see some weird shit. And then now you're like ruined forever. But it's like so far from the truth because all it like really what it does, if you don't take too much and you're not in a scary environment where you're going to like freak out because you feel uncomfortable. Safe environment. If you're in a safe environment and you do, the right
dosage.
amount, and you feel fine or whatever, what you're going to find is that all it does, and this is like, again, on a neurological level in your actual brain, is it stops your brain from having to think in preset patterns, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
Which is mysticism.
Explain that picture that we saw on Instagram.
So there's a picture of just like how your brain works. And it's like a circle and it's got all these different lines going from one side of the circle to the other.
No, it's an actual like brain, right? Isn't the picture like two brains and one's like first side is the placebo. So somebody that took a placebo thinking they're taking mushrooms, and then they did the brain scan, and they're seeing like what spots of the brain were firing and wiring on the placebo. And then they did a brain scan on somebody that took actual psilocybin, and everything was just igniting in the entire brain. So explain to...
That's what I was explaining.
Okay, yeah,
It's the same thing.
I interrupted
it's
you
okay.
then.
But like basically it's not a picture of like a real brain. It's literally a circle, and each line from
was
one
wrong.
It's cool though. You said it with confidence. So each line going from one side to the other to the circle represented a neural link. And so like the placebo, the people who took the placebo, their brains were firing normally, and it was all in these preset patterns and only certain links being made, like very low amount. Then the person on psilocybin in the next diagram, it showed all their neural links, and it was like probably 10 times more. So it just like allows your
You're
brain,
like super conscious.
yeah. And it's like just, it lifts the limiting beliefs off your brain and helps you be just kind of like, I guess like not even like open to anything. Cause that sounds scary to most people. Like, oh, what if I'm open to, demons and whatever.
Yeah.
But it just like keeps you from, like, it basically like lifts that subconscious demand your brain has to fit everything into a pattern. And so you're able to think freely. And the thing is, you shouldn't be afraid of that if you're in a sincere search for truth.
Yeah.
But we've all learned that drugs just mess us up and it's all bad. And like when you do it, it like you're probably going to believe something that's like not even reality because it was drugs.
Why do you think they tell us that? Why do you think like religious systems teach us that is your gateway to seeing demons and the devil? And
I don't think they do. I think Christianity does, because it does that with everything, like in the fundamental form. And there's just some like, I don't know. I think Christianity is maybe a little bit different Western religion, but you go to like India, and I don't think anyone says it's wrong. Like, as far as I know, I've heard like Eastern like yogis and people like Ram Dass's teacher, Ram Dass came to him and he was like, hey, like I discovered like the spiritual path through taking LSD thousands of times or hundreds of times or whatever. And he's like, if it wasn't for drugs and psilocybin and LSD and all these things, like I wouldn't be on the spiritual path. I wouldn't have woken up a little bit to get on this path. And his guru says, for some people it can be helpful. Do it once or twice more and then never do it again. And like, I think there's wisdom to not viewing it as a black and white, right and wrong. But I think there's wisdom to using it obviously rightly, like you're talking about, but also to not letting that be your crutch, I guess, like to develop, because you're only in that state of mind for what, like
2 hours,
few hours,
like 4 hours.
What if you could cultivate a state of mind where like a non-dual consciousness, or like an experience of reality without all these things, without all these structures, like in your day-to-day life? What if you could slip in and out of that all the time? What if you could like live, in a mystical reality all the time, like live in true reality all the time,
which you can,
instead of like, oh, I have to lift up this veil and go, which is not like a bad at all. It's a good like every once in a while, like remind me of this, I think. Or if you want to use it for partying, I don't care either. Like, but I think a lot of like Eastern teachers would also say like, you don't like any attachment to any of that kind of stuff eventually will kick you in the butt.
Yeah.
That's
well,
true.
I mean, I wonder if it just comes back to like moderation about everything, like, like with everything. Cause I mean, I think I agree with that, but I think even like, cause I listened to that podcast you sent of Ram Dass telling that story about writing his guru or whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And,
he even gave like 10 tabs of LSD or acid to his guru, and he took it. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay.
And he took it and like nothing happened. And then I think he did it again or something. And like Ram Dass like stayed in the room and watched him to make sure. And
the guy couldn't get high.
He couldn't really do it because he was quote unquote an enlightened being, and he was always kind of in that state of mind, so to speak. And I guess like, like yogis like are said to have like power over their reality and their mental state and their body and that
that's
stuff.
true to a certain degree for sure. Like I've seen like things where yogis can like change the color of their hand. They like restrict the blood flow.
Ram Dass talks about his teacher materializing things into thin air.
See, that's where I'm just kind of like, now we're getting into like,
I mean, who knows, right?
Who knows,
maybe it's true.
But the point of, let me finish that one piece. The point of what I was saying is that like, then he asked his guru about it, and he's like, what did you experience or whatever? And the way he put it is this could be helpful for some people. I can understand that. Like yogis of old used to use this like to contact the spiritual realm or whatever, or get in touch with it. And he said like, it allowed me to open the door to see Christ. But then the door closed after a couple hours. And he said, like, I want to live to where I can always have that door open.
Well,
basically.
I see the thing is, I wonder if we're
something like that. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. But I wonder if we're even meant to like live with that door open so much. Cause like, okay, so
I don't think so either.
More and more I'm getting convinced that like the point of this all is to have the human experience and not even have to be
just ups and downs, this and that.
That's the beauty of it all. And honestly, like
one doesn't exist without the other.
Exactly. And like whatever we were, if we were anything before being born, if we're like spirits before that, or if we're anything afterwards, like part of me, it's totally just like probably I smoke too much weed and think about weird, shit or whatever. But I'm like, I wonder if like part of us, like part of what it means to be like divine is to know suffering, is to know the human experience. And I wonder if like this isn't if we were divine beings,
that's like the point of the incarnation. Yeah.
If we were just perfect all the time and like lived in a state of perfection, I wonder if at some point you wouldn't just long for like a regular like human life with ups and downs, good and bad, mistakes, and
that's how Alan Watts, what I was saying, explains Hinduism is like reality is Maya, they say, which is illusion. Not meaning that like reality is fake, but it's a mirage of the real, and it's like kind of is fake to an extent because it's like his whole thing is like imagine you were God. I don't know how much philosophical sense this makes. It's kind of more just a thought experiment, but like imagine you were God. And you were perfect in bliss, like you were everything. Like imagine you were the truest reality of existence itself, like and nothing new ever happened because like you were perfect and perfection can't change, right? Like if that's our view of perfection in like maybe some Christian like perspectives is that like reality is perfect. But what if like God isn't perfection, because to be perfection would to be static and God has to be dynamic to be like good, kind of like, and what if you were God and nothing new could ever happen? Wouldn't you just want to like go like to sleep and like dream for a little bit, wake up and like think about that dream? Like, wouldn't you want to immerse yourself in something that's real because it's happening, but like also not real because it's not the truest reality? Like your dreams are real, right? They happen, you think them, they're experienced in real time. But you wake up and you're like, that dream wasn't reality. I'm in reality now. Yeah. In reality, I was sitting on a bed doing this. Like, yeah. And so it's like, that's what this reality is compared to the next levels or the truest reality maybe. So wouldn't you immerse yourself in something to like, just have a new experience, to have the ups and downs? And that's what duality is like this plane of existence is filled with duality, and the higher planes are more non-dual.
So how would you define duality?
That's a hard one too.
Yeah,
right?
Try to define that, like what your view of duality is, because I think a lot of our listeners won't know what that even means.
Yeah. Duality, I think, is seeing things as one or seeing things as split. So like you think of like your body, light and dark or something. Yeah. Or like a sound wave, Alan Watts again. We'll talk about like you don't have or like a musical note or whatever. If you look like at what a sound wave looks like, it's like the spiky or like a heartbeat or whatever. Like you don't have the peak without the valley. You don't have the valley without the peak, because a peak is not anywhere in space if there's no. Yeah, it's just not a thing. Like unless you have something to compare it to, and comparison creates duality, and like non-duality would be seeing things interconnected as one. Like you could look at your body and see, like I could point out. So mysticism is trying to stop picking apart reality and separating it into all these pieces and then studying those pieces. It's to put the pieces together and see a picture, a beautiful mosaic, instead of like all these puzzle pieces.
That's duality.
Yes.
That's non-duality.
That's non-duality. So duality is
picking it apart. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. That helps me. So maybe I'm a non-dualist then. I thought duality was just the recognition that things have like opposing natures and exist as one, in a sense. Like
I think that's a good way to put it too.
But it's the existing as one part that makes it non-dualistic, right? So it's like we're all kind of like a yin yang a little bit. We're all like light and dark. We all have like higher desires and lower desires. Like we all have like a higher consciousness and a lower consciousness.
But it's all desires and it's all consciousness. And so that's the unified thing. But it's not wrong to speak in dualistic terms, because you need, again, dualism as a bridge to non-dualism. Like you need to think like this is left and that's right, because if everything's relative, which is like the shipwreck of postmodernism, I feel like, then there's no and there's no absolute truth, which I kind of believe also. But if you go down that road fully, then it's like there's no left and right. There's no up and down. Like, okay, like you have to be able to function in life. You have to have comparisons and things.
Whatever these beliefs are, they're useful.
They're useful.
And they're necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. And necessary. Yeah. Totally.
And because of that, probably a part of the human experience that we're meant to have. You know? And that's why I'm like, okay, like I'm getting more to the point where it's like, is it how, like, I would love thinking about this stuff and I love talking about it. But I'm like, how much should I just stop worrying about it all? Because like
that's important in spiritual practice.
Yeah. Like at the end of the day, like I might be thinking of all this stuff. And even if I like start to understand some like crazy deep truths, am I really happier than the guy that just likes to, you know, like
probably
do
not
whatever he does all day?
That's why a lot of the Christian, I know Christian mystics more than Eastern, I guess, but maybe Eastern too. But they all talk about, they're like, don't try not to have mystical experiences. Like if you're like St. John of the Cross talks about mystical prayer as being like spirit to spirit communion with God. It's like beyond words, it's beyond images, it's beyond the mental. Like he says, the dark night of the soul is meant to put your senses to rest so that you can transcend them and commune with God on this more transcendent level.
And what's the dark night of the soul really quick?
Yeah. Explain that.
It's like a long it's like a long definition and like misunderstood thing too. But I think it's whether you want to see it as God or like our nature's way of purging your unconscious, I would say.
Gotcha. So it's like, it's almost like a existential crisis.
Kind of. Yeah.
Which do you think every person goes through the dark night of the soul, or maybe some people don't?
Yeah. Well, so dark night of the soul is like a coin termed not by St. John of the Cross, who coined that whole idea, wrote the book. Yeah.
Called the dark night of the soul. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's put it into two things called the night of spirit, the night of sense and the night of spirit. And the night of sense is your senses receding, where like, oh, I can't pray anymore. Like affirmative, what's it called? Cataphatic prayer, which is like using like positive, like words or ideas or affections or desires or whatever to connect with God. All those things like stop working and like you get no satisfaction and they don't work for you to connect you to God.
It basically feels like your spirituality gets blocked.
Yes.
Like a writer's block for your spirituality.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's meant to take you beyond them because that's like God weaning you off of like the milk so that you can eat the solid food or whatever. Like,
I went through the dark night of the soul. I remember you going through it.
I think most people do.
I think
that's
never
the night of
came out
sense.
of it.
And the night of spirit is like the same thing, but like worse and like more of a spiritual thing where you have to transcend even like the spiritual interaction with God to just have like more pure union, which sounds a weird woo-woo also.
No, I think I get it though. But like at the end of the day, it's kind of what we were talking about before, like the dualistic part of us and like your body. I kind of have this theory that like your mind and your body are always wanting balance. And that's why overindulgence and suppression of your desire are both not helpful.
Not healthy,
because like at the end of the day, your body's and your mind and your spirit is going to want to be balanced in the, you know, natural desires we have and the natural human experience we're meant to experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's like when we go through that dark night of the soul, I feel like sometimes we adopt, I feel like a lot of people that go through it adopt their belief system young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you reach this point later in life where you realize like you didn't really, like you have a choice. No one forced you to do anything, but based on the experiences you had and what you were exposed to,
you were ignorant
and you wouldn't have chosen anything else because you were unaware of other ways of thinking, other perspectives.
Yeah.
And so like you get to this point though, where you start to realize that, then all of a sudden this process of the dark night of the soul starts in you where it's like, okay, like now, because I'm aware of these other possibilities, the one thing that I believed was the only way to really view the world is no longer only that to me. And so now it stops having all of that power in your life.
Yeah.
And it won't come back until you venture out. It won't come back until you'll never be what you were until you allow yourself to be open to other possibilities and truths and then trust yourself to like navigate through it and come to a place of your own belief again.
Yeah. You have to lose your faith so that you can go deeper in it.
Yeah.
Like when Jesus says you have to lose your soul to find it.
Yeah. Lose your life to find it.
About that too. And I feel like a lot of like what happens when you're super religious and why people end up having these huge like problems when they're older, like pastors falling into sin or having affairs or like all
Carl Lentz, remember?
I think it's when you
legit.
I mean, there's
so many. There's
millions people you can point to.
All the people who haven't been found out yet too.
Yeah. Plus all the ones faking it. I feel like that whole thing, it like that comes back up if you ignore your dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
Because like your body, you are not like, where does those actions come from? Like pastor having multiple affairs or whatever, being a drug addict on the side, like where does that come from? If it's not from like,
it's suppressed stuff that you're trying to overcompensate for.
And it's your body, and it's your body, your mind, your subconscious demanding that you expand your perspective. It's literally
like nature's way of growing you up.
Yeah. It's like, no, you have to venture out. You have to see the world in a different way than you adopted when you were a child. You know?
How I think of it too, with what you're saying, just to kind of piggyback off of that is, okay, so you go out, you party all weekend, have a good time. Like you need to let loose, but just in the same way that you play that hard, you have to rest that hard. It's all about balance, right? So if you're always being like suppressed and you're just like work, and you're not giving yourself that time to like have rest and have fun and like let off a little steam, of course you're going to have an overindulgence in one area of your life. Like you can't have too much light and you can't have too much darkness.
You're out of balance.
Everything is about balance for sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
And then like, like getting too wrapped up in mysticism or like finding an identity in that is also bad, or like trying to like form a new structure of reality through mysticism is something that I did. And then I was like, I just did the same thing. Like the point of mysticism is to transcend those things. And I just made mysticism that thing I was trying to transcend. I was like, wait, well, it's helpful.
So it's like you, like the whole point of like you basically like the point is to try to pull away anything that's like a medium between you and reality. Yeah. But mysticism can become a new medium.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And then it's counterintuitive, and it's like, I mean, everything is like that though, right? You can do all the good deeds with a wrong motive, and then it affects your soul in a negative way or
it's
whatever.
Just a cycle. You know? I feel like it's always a cycle you have to go through, is like just, becoming aware of what things it is in this season. Yeah. That, what patterns of thought you're falling into now and it's not always bad to fall into a right pattern of thought. Like that's a good thing.
Or a helpful pattern, whether it's right or not. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's like, this cycle you always go through, because your brain's going to always want to do that, always want to find those patterns and rest, because your brain's trying to literally save energy. It's trying to go on airplane mode and just be like, we know what we're doing. Like, we don't need to think about this.
Everything's in the database, then I can be on autopilot.
And that's when you should be like, at least for me, that's when I try to recognize, I've been on autopilot for like a couple weeks or a few days or whatever. And then that's when I'm like, okay, like I need to get outside of this autopilot. I need to expose myself to something new. I need to read a new book. I need to, although I don't ever hardly do that, I just listen to
talk
books.
to someone else, go for a walk, self-reflect, do something. Yeah. Pray, whatever.
Like change your pattern, a little bit.
Well, like speaking about solitude, I know we talk a lot about that because you're the one that kind of got me on this path of exploring meditation and solitude and contemplative prayer, which I think contemplative prayer is the same thing as what,
it's meditation with the twist.
Yeah, it's meditation with the twist.
Yeah.
You want to talk to me or talk to us about like your thoughts on how you meditate and like how it's changed you?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I think I find life in like reading and understanding things and like creating a structure again, like for reality, like understanding, like putting words to things, putting words to ideas that are in my subconscious and making them conscious is like, oh yes, like I connected this piece of the puzzle. It's like, makes me happy. And so I think I've overspent time trying to figure things out and underspent time like in actual practice, which is just like stupid, like doesn't make any sense. But I think it is very helpful to go through like that last couple years, that season of like just learning. And now I'm trying to get into a season of practice, I think. But I meditate. I feel like I haven't meditated once to twice a day, every day for like a month so far. Like I've been like 2, 3, 4, 5 days. Yeah, currently. I'll go like 5 days and then like I miss one day and then I just miss a whole week or something. Or
it's like when you were like trying to read the Bible
working
as
out.
a Christian. Working out.
Or like having a devotional practice.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. And so I don't think like I'm experienced enough to like tell you like, this is what meditation does in your life. And like, these are the fruits of it. And like, you should do it because X, Y, and Z. And I think it's important to speak out of your own experience. But it's also like when you don't have that experience, you follow like a tradition of wisdom that has been down that road before you and has told you like, this is what you're going to face as a human. These are the things that you need to like purge in your dark side. These are this is how you become a whole integrated human being. Like that's what Jesus was, a rabbi or a guru. Like this is a way of life that connects you to divinity, to your true self, to like union with God, whatever. This connects you to the best way of living and to like fulfill your potential and become a whole integrated, loving person. And it's like, so I believe because of those people that I've listened to and followed and studied, that meditation is like the core key practice of any spirituality. And because it's been practiced in every religion across centuries or across like
time,
geography and time. And like, I think for me, when I am a little more consistent in meditation, I'm more mellow. Like Cynthia Bourgeois again is someone who says like centering prayer has a tendency to just mellow people out and they're okay with reality because it's all a practice of letting go of your thoughts, letting go of everything. Cause you can't control it. Yeah. You can't control it. Like you said, your mind does these things. It grabs onto something and like, that's what like they call like monkey brain is, like you sit down to meditate.
Consciousness, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Monkey brain.
Like you sit down to meditate and like,
I want a banana.
Sorry. I just want to swing from trees right now. It's like you sit down to meditate and all of a sudden your mind goes wild because your mind isn't used to, your mind 24/7 for your whole life has been used to thinking, grasping onto thought, like understanding something, processing something, even when you're vegging out. Like when you sit and meditate, people often have like insights and stuff. And it's like the idea of centering prayer, at least in a lot of Buddhist meditation and Eastern, like, I mean, the point of yoga is to have an empty and clear mind. Because then you can be clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that probably, so that's kind of like the religious or not religious, but like the spiritual way to think about it, which is important. Then I think on the practical side, like your brain literally is such a computer. And if you like use your computer too long, have you ever had like the fan turn on where it's just like, and you're like
on the old Macs?
Yeah. It's like too hot and it's like it's too much heat.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think when you spend time meditating, like literally we spend our whole day. And if we're on our phone when we wake up and then we go through our whole day and then at night we're on our phone right before we go to bed or whatever, it's like you don't have time to like, you don't make the time to process, the experiences you've had, the emotions that those experiences made you feel. And you just go with it and just like cope and, distract from those things. And your brain never stops. So it's always processing. Your brain fan is going all the time.
Yeah.
And you can't break out of patterns of thinking because you literally don't have like the brain energy, like to think outside. You need to stay locked in those patterns because your brain's so tired. But then when you meditate, like basically you're giving yourself space. It's like turning off the computer for a minute.
Yeah.
And you're giving yourself
space. It's like a Sabbath for your brain.
Yeah. And you have time to process your emotions. You have time to think. That's why your brain goes crazy because it's like, we have so much to deal with right now.
Yeah.
We're finally chilled out.
And it's addicted to noise and to doing instead of like, I forget who it is who says this, but they say like, you are a human being, but most people think that you're a human doing. Like you don't know how to just be.
Whoa.
No.
Like you just do. But like your most natural state is to just be and exist and like to not integrate that. Before humans evolved to be like reflective and self-conscious, there was no thinking. There was just like subconscious, your body thought for you. Like your body was your first brain basically. And like you acted like you didn't have the ability to reason and like use logic and to understand yourself and to see yourself as a separate entity from your reality. Like you were immersed in mysticism like a child is like, and to not integrate that into your life at all is to leave a piece of you unfulfilled and like to suppress a piece of you, like we were saying.
For sure.
Well, like for me, when it came to like my old religious practices and disciplines as a Christian, I remember how much pressure and like value we had in having a devotional time where you would sit down, you would open the Bible, you would read the scriptures, you would try to understand it, you would try to reflect on it. And there was like a whole way that was taught to us, like how to have a devotional time that was the best way to experience God.
Yeah.
And I remember working at a church and going to school and being a wife and just always doing. And then having to have this sacred time with God was also doing. Like I'm trying to analyze and understand and logically process the scripture.
Counterintuitive. Like,
so it got to the point where my devotional practices were actually more draining for me than they were refreshing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't admit that because it was embarrassing to admit that. And I honestly hated reading the Bible, and I hated devotional time because it just felt like it wasn't peaceful. It wasn't restful. Yeah. I'm wrestling with these scriptures. I'm wrestling to understand how to apply this to my life.
Yeah.
And
a wise Christian pastor would have told you, like, stop reading the Bible, stop praying, just sit in silence and be receptive to God and clear your mind.
And
because that's the point of reading it in the first place, is to be connected to God. And if that practice isn't helping that,
it was not for me.
Then it's just a religious practice, right?
So that's why, like, I had to stop doing devotional time, and I felt really guilty, and I had to like keep it a secret. Because it just was unfruitful for me. And it got to the point where for me, like the best times that I had recharging was just sitting there listening to music, listening to like worship music or whatever. But even that, like I'm analyzing and thinking and processing. And it wasn't until like I started learning about what meditation was and realizing that meditation is not something you can just do first weekend. Like it's a skill that you have to master because your thoughts are bouncing around, going crazy.
Yeah.
And in meditation, the whole point of it is you're becoming an observer of those thoughts with non-judgment. And that takes time because sometimes your mind will just latch on to that thought and you're just like gone in the rabbit trail.
And are you saying that you should let yourself like be okay with that?
Yeah.
That's dualism too, because you're trying to judge every thought that goes by and like critique it and analyze it as if it's like not a part of the whole. And to not judge it is to just accept it as it is.
And that's just like your subconscious processing through stuff. And like you let that happen and you'll feel less anxious during the day because there's not like all this stress or pressure. Like, oh, there's things that we have to deal with still. And it's like, it helps you be more calm, helps you be more relaxed. But like, and I think like I know for me, like I'm not I have a really bad ADD probably.
Yeah. I
and
do
like
too,
meditating is probably my hardest.
That's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. But getting better at it. But the thing that helps me is because like some of y'all can just like start meditating. What I've had to do is like find those guided meditations on YouTube.
That's helpful.
And and go along with them. And even those are a struggle. But sometimes what I do now that's been really helpful is Melina turned me on to like how there's these different frequencies and different hertz or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're supposed to like help you feel different things. It's basically like this low like sound all the way up to this really high.
They reverberate with different chakras.
And they're supposed to like open different chakra points on you. But I'll just like pick one, play it, and let it sit in the background and just close my eyes in like total darkness and just be okay with whatever happens.
Yeah.
You know, and be okay with however long it takes, however long I want to be there, or however long I want to, or however short it ends up being. Just being okay with all that. And then over time, like you feel so refreshed from that because your brain ends up processing through stuff. And then once you reach the end of that queue of all the emotions and experiences you've had lately that you need to just process through, it's like, okay, now that's gone. And now I'm just free to like let whatever come in. And that's when it feels like powerful, but it takes time to do that. And I just feel like hasn't been a natural thing for me.
Whatever trick or helpful tool you can use to learn, like use it.
And so for you
don't view it as a crutch or anything.
Do you prefer doing it kind of more like that? Or do you like to do contemplative prayer still? Or I don't know exactly what your modality.
Centering prayer is what I like try to practice every day when I can, which is you have a sacred word. It doesn't, you don't have to be a Christian or whatever to like to do it, but you have a sacred word, whatever that word is that symbolizes your intention to open to the divine. Basically, you open to God's presence and action within is what Thomas Keating says, who made the method or whatever. And then
what's his name?
Thomas Keating.
Oh, okay.
He's probably like in the Christian tradition, I would consider him like my guru person as like in the Catholic tradition. He's
Catholic.
He's Catholic. Yeah. He died in like 2 years ago or something like that. But, he was really cool. He's just like a really wise person, like bigger than the Christian tradition. Like he was outside of that, but he did it with, like I said, within a Christian tradition.
Was he a mystic?
He was a mystic.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
His whole thing is like mysticism was the core foundation. And so was contemplative prayer throughout all of church history until the Enlightenment and the Protestant Reformation. And then we basically lost that for 500 years. And so he's like, we got to get back to this because this is
what
like,
is it?
So it's called
Centering prayer.
contemplative prayer, and centering prayer is a way of, it's like a bridge to contemplative prayer.
So it's like you make like this holy word or sacred word for you, like just a thing that you only say when you're ready to go into a spiritual like place in your mind and through meditation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a little like medium between you. Well, actually that goes against,
no. A good medium. Eventually the word's supposed to drop out and you don't need to use it anymore.
mysticism.
So what's your word that you use?
So I use the word.
Wait, can you even share it, or does that make it less?
No, yeah, you can share it, or I don't mind sharing it.
Okay.
So I do like also just to preface, in the Eastern Church, there's what's called the prayer of the heart, or the Jesus prayer, which is like, sounds super cheesy, like growing up in like an evangelical church.
Jesus prayer.
I feel like it just ruins everything. Like all the Christian terminology is just like cheesy, like put on the armor of God is like, that could be so powerful, but it's just like, don't say that to me.
Now it's just cringy.
I know, now it's cringy.
But the prayer is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And so sometimes I just shorten it to like mercy, or have mercy on me, which is just like symbolizing, I want my spirit to open up and to be receptive to God and his mercy, which is like the gift of life and the gift of whatever he wants to do. And so like, sometimes I'll switch between that. Like I use that word when I'm walking around all day. And then when I'm doing centering prayer, I use the word Abba, because it's like a devotional term in my mind.
It's more intimate.
Yeah. And so it symbolizes like, I desire God, and like even letting go of that desire for God though, and just being like, just like sitting there, being open and receptive to God's presence and action, even if you don't feel it with the senses, because it's supposed to be transcendent of your senses. And so like, you just kind of say that word every time your mind engages in a thought, you say Abba, or whatever your thing is, to
bring it back,
windshield wipe the screen clean and bring it back to no thoughts, nothing. You're not focusing your awareness on the word, or else that's counterintuitive as well. You're not focusing your mind on God, or on, I want this to happen, or I'm not like imagining God or whatever. It's just like the word is like trying to get your attention back onto nothing except like openness.
Yeah. For me, I am loving awareness. I learned it from Ram Dass.
Yeah.
And for me, that really is a useful tool for me to just become
loving awareness.
I don't know. Like it really helps me when I'm trying to meditate, and I'm trying to just be more open and receptive. I like saying that one.
I like that too. Yeah.
I don't have a word.
It's okay. You don't have to. Yeah.
That's probably my word.
Or at all.
Damn it.
To.
That's cool though.
That is cool.
I'm gonna try that out.
It's
and I'm
helpful.
glad like it's like something that people listening to can try out, because and no matter what you believe, it's something that can work, right? Because whatever
if
you
Abba
see
or God or whatever, like
the you can relate it to the universe.
Yeah, just say like, I don't know, just say anything,
whatever.
Like
your ancestors, your past lives,
love, joy. Like the cloud of unknowing is the classic mystical prayer text that the monks who created centering prayer based it on. And the cloud of unknowing, he says he's teaching people, like it's a letter to his student on how to venture into the contemplative life from the active life, basically. And he says like, use like the longer the phrase is, the more your mind has to think.
More processing.
The more processing there is. So like one syllable, one word, 2 syllables at most, like use the word God or love is what he recommends. So like keeping it short so you don't have to like process, what does this word mean again? But you just say it as a way of like, I like that idea of like windshield wiping the windows clean, like clean the slate. Like that's what, as far as I know, like Buddhist meditation is mainly aimed at, is emptying your mind. Because then you can see reality clearly. A lot of Christians,
like especially my mom, she's like, this is what she tells me.
Your mom, though, so
I love my mom.
Bad about her on the podcast.
But she says this a lot, like, Buddhists and yogis, they talk about emptying the mind in meditation and in yoga. And that's so bad, because now you're leaving open, you're susceptible to like evil. And I mean, I don't know.
Saying Jesus fully emptied himself, like emptying yourself is the pathway to divinity.
That's fine for him, because he was sinless and not able to sin. So,
but that's not true either, because I think the scripture makes it very clear he was fully human.
Yeah,
and he was fully divine.
Ooh, now we're getting into the hypostatic union.
Yeah, which is non-duality in itself. Because if Jesus was fully human and fully divine,
then what point would it be for him to even do that if he didn't even have the ability to sin?
I think, It's complicated. That's one of the hard things that's been hard to let go for me for Christianity is because even the mystics and the people who I learn all this stuff from, like, still have such a high reverence for Jesus as man, but also like God in a more divine way than we are. And like everything within me and like all my, like looking at Christianity from an Eastern religious perspective says like, no, we kind of like divinize Jesus a little more than he should have been. Like Jesus was a human who was fully self-realized and enlightened and understood his divine and human nature fully and integrated
what I believe,
them.
Personally.
Yeah, that's what I believe too. But it's hard to at the very least, I think, I mean, who knows, right? But like, if Jesus is
try not to move it.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I just view Jesus as a guru. Like he was an enlightened being. I don't know if he's more enlightened than anyone else in history, but he was an enlightened being who at least understood this wisdom of how to connect with God and integrate your life. And like, that's all he means.
That's
I think
worth reverence.
That's worth reverence and like
revering. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like like how you honor an elder. It's like, that's how I honor Jesus is like, I can call you God. I can pray to you to intercede for me still on my behalf to God, because like, I think he's another spiritual being, an entity out there that's like, you know, like it sounds like super woo woo, but Yogananda, who I've also learned a lot from, talks about like, he'll say like his guru was Mahavatar Babaji is what his name was.
I know.
Nice.
I
And he was supposed to be, he's like they call him like the Christ of India. Like he is said to have like materialized to his followers a lot after his death and do lots of the same miracles and things Jesus
and he
did.
only lived like 100 years ago or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
Something like that. And Yogananda like came to America
like,
in the 20s and taught here for his life.
Okay. Yeah.
But he says like,
I love Yogananda.
he's so like, dude, he cuts through religion and like, he just teaches pure like wisdom through a Kriya Yoga perspective, because he knows these techniques to like enlighten you, or like to raise your consciousness, whatever you want to call it. I forgot what my point was. So, he says Christ, like Jesus, like he has a super high reverence for Jesus too. And he basically, he talks about him and Babaji as like equals, kind of like the two most enlightened beings in history, or at least in recent history that we know of, and how they're working behind the scenes, like in the cosmic realms to like guide humanity basically together.
Interesting.
Cool
And I'm
with
like,
that.
I can
get behind
like,
that.
I don't know, who knows? I don't know why you believe that, or like,
I'm just,
there's no reason to like,
believe it over something else. Like everything's just as possible, right?
Yeah.
But that's why it's like, okay, that's why like where I've come from, where it's like every belief is, you know, okay, until the point that it really does oppress or hurt somebody, you know?
Sure.
But like, I want to let you, because I know you're like been wanting to say something, but I do want to shift gears right after that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So what I've been thinking about too, what we're talking about being fully human, fully divine, that's what Jesus was, an enlightened being. I feel like that's kind of what we're discovering in the human experience as well, is how to integrate the human part of us, like the shadow self. I think being a mystic, you have to integrate both, like the pure, beautiful light side of who you are, the pure goodness, the spiritual part, like the goodness within you. But then you
You're
also
talking about the physical part too.
I mean, I don't know if it's the physical part, but your humanity, like your dark desires or whatever that, you know, we polarize in Christian religion. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Just how you view.
Yeah. I think the resurrection and like the cross and resurrection are the key symbols of theology in Christianity, and they're found in every religion, I think, just in a different form. But I would say like the point of the resurrection is to say that what dies doesn't stay dead. It comes back to life in a different form. Transformation, evolution, whatever you want to call it, is the resurrection. And so like the idea of your dark side existing with your light side, or whatever, your lower and your higher nature, your animal instincts and your more evolved self who can learn how to be selfless and love, whatever. Those two things are warring in yourself, right? Like Paul says, the flesh and the spirit war against each other. And I do the things I don't want to do. I don't do the things I want to do. Who will save me from this body of death? Like I can't like integrate these natures because they're opposites. Like, but I think the point of the resurrection is to say like, if you follow, let's just take Christianity for an example, but like you follow these teachings of Jesus, this way of life, this way of thinking, all the way until death, and then the ultimate letting go is dying, right? And like the ultimate act of letting go in the metaphor would be like transforming your shadow side into light. Like the stuff in your life that needs to die doesn't just like die. Like God doesn't like burn the world at the end and make a new one. He like transforms the world, you know, like
it's
in
not
like good Christian theology or whatever.
Like,
he makes all things
redemption.
new, not all new things or whatever. Yeah.
Oh,
and so it's like
not all new things.
Yeah.
Makes all things new.
I
think that's the point of the resurrection is like that's a pattern in reality that you can see. Like if something dies, it doesn't die, it just changes form. And so like for your shadow side, you have to like direct those like Dallas Willard says, your flesh is your disordered desires. And so it's like your desires have a perfect fulfillment in this range of things. You use it for this, and then you're unfulfilled, or you're damaging your life, your soul, you're not having balance.
Yeah.
And so to like point all your desires back towards this like tip of the triangle instead of dispersing them, like maybe is integration, and is maybe like working like a metaphor for working through your shadow side and changing it, like directing it to a different direction, not killing it. Like it's not about crucifying your desire. Right. Christianity is about transforming
integrating it in the right and a right and balanced and healthy way.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I think that's really healthy, and I think it helps people with like a lot of religious pressure, like to be relieved too, because you know you don't have to see a part of yourself as like wrong, as evil, as like ungodly, as bad. Yeah. You know, you can see your whole self as just yourself. Yeah. You know, neither good or bad in nature necessarily, but just searching for balance. Yeah. And if we find balance, we can, you know, have that relationship with ourselves that's healthy, relationship with others that are healthy. So you want to say one more thing?
The only thing I would want to say is on my recent spiritual journey, like within the last couple months, I verbalized to some friends, guys, I'm really trying to love the parts that I hate about myself. I have areas that I hate about me because in religion, in my religious upbringing, and I'm not going to blame it on a pastor or whatever, my parents, I'm just saying like how I interpreted the framework of Christianity and like warring the flesh and crucifying the flesh, like all that terminology just kind of created in me a self-hatred and like a lot of rivalry and war against myself. And in turn, it just created more guilt and more shame in me and hatred. And now I'm perpetuating the cycle of hate, perpetuating the cycle of suffering. And now what Jesus came to abolish, which was shame and guilt. Yeah. Now you
can't change something without loving it.
Exactly.
And I love Richard Rohr also has this phrase where he says God loves things by becoming them. And it's like to delve into those like dark parts of yourself and just be with them and be okay with them changes things, because like God never try to convert us. Like God wouldn't try to convert a sinner by hating them, right? Like love is the ultimate like weapon, the spiritual weapon that changes things. And like, why would you think it's any different with yourself
because it's
not
like,
love yourself?
And that's the whole thing with hell. I mean, it's like the gun to your head in a sense, like believe in hell, and
it makes no sense.
Yeah. And if God wants the heart,
believe, turn or burn. You know?
Jesus, I feel like Jesus used that a lot, but he used it in a way of not like, you better do this or else you're going to go to hell. He used it as a way of like, the narrow road is the hard path to spirituality and to life. If you venture outside that road, it's easier, it's bigger, more people are doing it, but it's going to lead to destruction and death. And that's what all hell or Gehenna in the New Testament is like, hey, like your life and your soul and your spirit, you're going to burn outside the city of Jerusalem in this dump heap, which is what Gehenna was like.
Yeah. And I feel like I need to say one thing real quick because, like,
sorry, I'm rambling.
No, I actually think that's very fascinating.
But like, I know for me, the way I would have listened to this conversation when I was a Christian, I would have looked at it and been like, okay, well, I know this argument to refute this thing you said. I know this argument to refute this thing you just said. That's okay. And that is totally okay. But also, don't think the buck stops there, because like that was where I started deconstructing, was at that process. And then there's a response to your response. There's a response to your response's response. And then probably 10 more responses back and forth all the way down. And it's like, that's why at the end of this, it's like, just because you can think of an answer of like why that's wrong doesn't mean you're right.
Yeah.
Like it's just
an idea. It's not reality.
Yeah.
I think that's why the Buddha refused to teach metaphysics supposedly, is because like philosophy is endless. Like Philosophers will argue all day till the end of time about what's right, what's true. It doesn't matter.
It's a circle.
Yeah, it's a circle. Yeah. But that's why mysticism seems a little more credible to me too. Not to be like, oh, all mystics like believe everything they say or whatever, but like the fact that mystics are philosophers in a sense, theologians, metaphysicians or whatever you want to say. Is that what
I don't know. I think
metaphysicists. Like they're describing reality and giving you a structure for it in poetic and like metaphorical terms, symbology. Yeah. But it's like they're all saying the same thing. And I look over at all these philosophies and like theology and different religions, like approach to things. And I'm like, they're all a little different. And this piece doesn't really fit in this religion, no matter how hard I try to integrate them together. Mm-hmm. This philosophy and this philosophy and this philosophy all are kind of like saying the same thing, but a little different still. Mm-hmm. But it's like mystics all say like, no, this is all like the same stuff. And so it's, to me, it's more of like that's what science is, right? You get a lot of data and whatever, like, oh, like all these things come across the same, or you have a lot of data and they're all different, then like we can't prove this. But even gravity, whatever, the things that we know to be true are theories, like because based on the fact that every time I drop a ball, it comes down to the floor. Like, okay, does that prove that one time you'll drop a ball and it will go up? It doesn't prove that, but it says it's the most likely thing. And like, I think that's why mysticism is credible to me in a sense, is because they're all saying the same thing across time, across history, across geography, across religion. When philosophy can just get muddy.
So it's like, to sum it up, I think what you're kind of saying is it's like like this life is kind of unknowable, and to put all of this into like a belief structure that tries to make sense of everything is never going to fully work. Yes. So the belief system, like mysticism, that actually embraces the mystery of this all and embraces the fact that it's kind of unknowable all at the end. Yeah. That's a belief system that actually, even though it doesn't make sense of everything, it makes the most sense to embrace, because not everything is you're not going to be able to make sense of everything. Mm-hmm.
And that whole idea is a modern thing in the first place. I feel like
it's very Western.
It's very Western, like post Enlightenment, Renaissance, whatever. Like we only think with the, I forget which left or right side of your brain, but
it's freaking one perspective.
It's one part of you. Yeah. And that's why like the overemphasis on science is not going to make complete integrated people. Science can't be the new religion. They have to coexist and like bootstrap each other.
Well, I've had an idea. So I wanted to, since we're brothers and stuff and we grew up like all together because we're brothers, I was wanting to maybe shift into maybe telling some stories.
Dude, that'd be fun.
But what I think we should do...
Am I allowed to go pee real quick?
Well, I think we'll wrap it up right now.
Oh, okay.
And what we're going to do... I think we're going to do... This is an idea hitting me right now. Okay. We should just do like a bonus episode where we should smoke some weed and come here and tell us funny stories about each other.
That'd be so funny.
And maybe we'll just do it audio only and just release it as a special. Or maybe I'll try to get people to pay me a little bit of money to do this and like make it a Patreon thing or something.
That's how you start your Patreon.
Totally. But we'll do something. And I'm just going to tell you... I'll just drop a little... 100%. And I'm going to just drop a little like breadcrumb right now. I feel like the story I want to tell is when Jesse committed his first felony at the age of like 11 or 12.
Oh yeah. No, I was younger than that, I think.
Was it? Were you? Yeah,
at the school when the police came?
No, not that one. Like the felony you actually committed the felony of.
I broke into the cabin?
Nope, not that one. We'll tell it. We'll tell it on the.
What did I do?
It on the story or on the extra
committed
episode.
A felony?
Yeah, legit.
At 11 or 12?
Yeah,
dude,
legit.
Yeah.
Dude,
I'm excited to tell, or I'm not going to tell the story. I'm going to let Zach.
I was such a rebel.
Yeah, bad boy over here. But yeah, so we'll do that. But for now, I feel like that was a fantastic conversation.
I hope guys.
You're all going to need to go meditate and process this one after this episode.
We did talk a lot about
existential
a lot of stuff.
Shit.
So
yeah, I feel like that's my problem is I like go inch deep and a mile wide in a bunch of things and I don't fully flesh out a lot of stuff.
Are you kidding me? We went a mile deep, I feel like.
Okay, I hope so.
Yeah.
No, I kind of feel like we talked about
touched on a lot of stuff.
Which is cool, which is why we're going to have a lot of things, especially for our listeners. They could tell us and give us feedback like, hey, let's dive into this topic more. And then maybe we can have another podcast episode talking about what is the Christ or, whatever topic comes up.
Yeah.
Because I think that'd be kind of interesting.
That's a great idea.
Down the road.
Yeah.
Totally.
We'll definitely do a lot more podcasts all together.
But good job, Jesse. Your first podcast.
Love you, bro.
Good job.
Good job, Melina. You're a great co-host or host or whatever we are. And wife, definitely. But all right, thanks everybody. Hope you come back for the next one, and we love you all. Grow your perspective, be woke and awesome, and have a great day.